Welcome to Public Forum, a community outreach program produced at North Idaho College on the shores of Lake Coeur d'Alene. Featuring guests from around the globe addressing a wide variety of subjects, Public Forum serves to educate and enlighten. Please join host and moderator, political scientist Tony Stewart, in welcoming today's guest.
I welcome you to today's program. We are just so delighted to have the guest that we have today. Our topic is going to be America's foremost quick change artist. Our guest has performed in vaudeville and on film and theater, television. He also does a lot of other things, such as lighting design and managing. And we're just delighted to welcome to our program Michael McGivney. I've known you, Michael, for some time and had no idea until a few days ago how incredibly talented you are, and your career is just fascinating. And we've done this program for 35 years, and we've never done a show on this subject. And so you're so gracious to give us this time, and thank you for being here.
Well, thank you so much for asking me to be on the show. And in fairness, there's not a lot of people that can say they're quick change artists, so to say that it's been 35 years since you've ever had this subject, I can certainly understand why.
It took a while to find the person.
It took a while to find it.
And it's always, I'm pleased to have a regular panelist, Janelle Burke, who's an attorney in the state of Idaho, and next to her is Erna Reinhardt, who's Director of Public Relations at North Idaho College, and Janelle Burke will start today's questioning.
Michael, welcome to the show. For the benefit of our viewers, I hope they'll hold on to their seats and just enjoy learning about the theater, about films, about television, all the exciting things you've done in your life. But you were almost literally born into the theater. Can you please tell us something about your early life?
Well, my father was a famous vaudeville headliner. He came out of the British Music Hall, but his major success was in the United States. And as a vaudeville headliner, he traveled around the country, and he did that for quite a few years until eventually he did marry. He was like 51, I think, when he finally got married. Being an Irishman, he was a late one to get involved in family, and he had several children, and my sister, my brother, and myself. But when he came to the United States in 1912, he traveled around for about 2 years. Vaudeville circuits ran for really from September until the end of May, and then they were down in the summertime. So in his first year off for that summer, he went back to England. Then he came back to the United States. And it looked, I mean, his career had really reached a top level, so he was going to be in this country for a while. So he asked somebody where was the nearest large lake from New York City, and they said Lake Hopatcong. And so he was one of the third person, I think, ever to build on Lake Hopatcong, built a house there. And that was his residence in the United States, and he toured for 9 months and then came back.
And so you were born then in that area?
Actually, I was born in, I want to say I was born in a trunk in the Princess Theater, but no, I was born on Lake Hopatcong in New Jersey, just outside of New York City. At the time that I was born, my father was in England, and war broke out in England. So we lived in New Jersey, and it wasn't until after the war, 1945, that we traveled back to England. And I was about 6 years old when I first met him.
A question I've always wondered, did you know your father was famous? Did you know he was the center of attention?
Yes, absolutely. And people have asked me that question. As I was growing up, even though I didn't have a father as a young boy, I was very aware that my father was a famous man and that he was in Europe because there was a war going on and we couldn't transport back and forth. So eventually in 1945, my mother and my brother and sister and I got on the Queen Mary, and we went back to England. What's kind of fun about that is that the Queen Mary was not a luxury ship at that time. It was actually a troop transport carrier. So we had a cabin with 12 bunk beds in it. And of course, my sister and brother and I always fought as to who got onto which bunk. But when I met him, and he was touring in the British, it started off as British music halls, but at that point they were called Variety. Moss Empires were the famous variety circuit in England. And I saw my dad for the first time in the city that we were living in there, in Preston, which is in Lancashire country. And I wasn't quite sure what it was all about. I just saw this amazing performance going on stage. Should I mention the fact that he was he was the world's foremost quick change artist?
And you became America's most famous.
Yeah, he was the world's greatest quick change artist, and I became America's foremost after him. Yeah. But he performed in vaudeville for 50 years. So when he, we were in England, I think, for about 2 years, and then he got a call from a man called Ken Murray. And Ken Murray had a famous show in Hollywood called Ken Murray's Blackouts. And if you were in New York City, you'd see the Radio City Music Hall and the Rockettes. If you came to Hollywood, outside of seeing the Stars home at the Grauman's Chinese Theater, you had to see Ken Murray's Blackouts. It was quite a successful, and it was the last of the big vaudeville shows. With that, we'll move on to Erna Reinhardt.
Welcome, Michael. As an older child, then, you grew up in Hollywood with your dad eventually transitioned from vaudeville to film, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah. What happened, an agent saw him in Blackouts and saw that he was playing a variety of characters, and he said, Owen, you know, there's a lot of work in films for character actors. And this would be about 1951, 52. One of the first films that he did was called If Winter Comes with Gregory Peck. And then he did Showboat with Howard Keel and Katherine Grayson. And the thing that I remember as a child, and I was maybe about 9 years old, we were allowed to take a day off from school. They let us do that then. And we took a day off from school and we went to see the shooting of Showboat. And they were doing a sequence where the Showboat had just docked at the pier, and the dancers were all in a big production number coming off the ship. And while they were doing that, Ava Gardner had a scene coming up. But she wasn't doing that yet, and she was working with a little monkey, and she was having problems with this monkey. And so I got to sit down with her, and we played with the monkey, and I got to sit on Ava Gardner's lap when I was 9 years old.
No wonder you're
my gosh, yeah, that's great.
She was beautiful and gracious, yes.
We could do 2 shows on just your father and his career, but also that was your introduction, and he opened the door for you to be in some of the areas you were, and then you expanded beyond that. Also, before we get into some photographs, I want to show our audience some photographs. You've just had a fascinating work yourself, and you've appeared on I've Got a Secret, which maybe we'll have time to deal with Gary Moore, and Uncle Milton Berle on his show.
Uncle Milty was a major benefactor, yes.
Yes, and that was a title of your father and all.
Because he worked, Milton worked as a comic in a show that my dad was a headliner in.
Yes. And then you also, in film, you were the double for Danny Kaye in the film called On the Double.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then also you toured for 5 years with the Shipstead and Johnson Ice Follies. And
well, it's interesting. I've had a number of careers in my life. I started off thinking in school that I was going to be an actor and a performer out of, naturally, from the family history. And then I was also very interested in production, in sets and how the costumes and lighting and sets, all that integrated. And when I was in grade school, I was best friends with a fellow called Donald Shipstead, and his dad was one of the brothers that owned the Shipstead and Johnson Ice Follies. So every year we would go and see that ice show, and I was fascinated with its production value. And due to just a quirk, I got connected with them. I was what they called a utility man. I was assistant to the stage manager, the lighting designer, or in those days, the lighting director. Because in ice shows, it was done primarily with follow spots, and it took 10 follow spots to light those shows, as you can probably see with the skating shows that we have today.
Let's go through some slides. The time is running fast by this first show. We have 9 photographs, and if you'll take us through that, this is advertising your father.
Okay, this is Owen McGivney in Bill Sykes. Bill Sykes was the name of his quick change act. And as you can see, that's what they call having your name in lights. They're actual light bulbs that make up the lettering.
Which you would also experience in, later.
Yeah.
And our second photograph here, give us an idea of this. This is
All
your
right,
father?
now this is my father at about the time that I met him. He was about 60, and it was in Ken Murray's Blackouts. It was at the end of the show, and he has, he came, at the end of the show you end up being soaking wet. So there's a towel that's sort of stuck there in the front of his shirt. And he's just thanking the audience for the performance that he's just done.
How long would his performance last? How many minutes?
The Quick Change Act lasted about 12 minutes in vaudeville.
Let's go to photograph 3 now.
This was at MGM with Bing Crosby, and Bing, of course, is in the center. He was a good friend of Bing Crosby's from vaudeville and also from Ken Murray's Blackouts. Bing used to frequent that. And Johnny Miller, the man on the left there, was a tap dancing trainer for Bing Crosby.
And the fourth photo?
This is one of the characters from the Oliver Twist sketch. This is Monks, who's sort of one of the real villains of the piece.
And we'll go to number 5.
This is, of course, Fagin.
Again, we're in the quick change here.
This is the same man in in a different costume and makeup.
And done very quickly,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Number 6.
This is a character called the Artful Dodger, also in the sketch from Dickens' Oliver Twist. And should I explain that what a quick change artist is?
We will when we get through these films.
Okay.
That's going to be my next question
Right.
for you.
Uh-huh.
And number 7.
Bill Sykes, of course, who is the main character in the story. And the storyline leads to the murder of Nancy. So it's basically Bill Sykes, Nancy, Fagin, Monks, and the Artful Dodger, the 5 characters.
So you're once again multi-personality. Now here's a photograph of you and your performance.
All right, and when I give the performance as if I were to do it here as a college, I sit down and read a little bit of the Dickensian words that describe the murder of Nancy from Oliver Twist, and that's what you see me doing there.
And finally, here you are again.
And these are a number of characters. I have several sketches besides the Bill Sykes one. I also have the Shootout at Bell's Saloon, which is a comedy western. There was a tribute that I did on a sci-fi television show to Lon Chaney, and I did 3 of his characters, the Phantom of the Opera and the Hunchback of Notre Dame.
Oh, you're so talented. We're going to do one other thing before we get to the panel, and we have for our viewers actually video, so they can really. I would bet 95% of our audience has never seen this, and so this kind of quick change artist. First of all, define what we mean by both your father and you being so famous in this area and really at the top of the world in this area. What do we mean by a quick change artist?
Well, one of the other words besides quick change that is referred to as a protean artist, and Proteus was the Greek god that was able to change his shape at will. So the textbook case is the quick change artist is an actor playing a variety of characters through instant changes of costumes, makeups, and characterizations.
And you do that within just a few seconds, and you have assistants behind stage helping you change.
I have 2 backstage dressers, and it's all just very, very finely coordinated. Every movement has to be down so precise that you don't even think about it, because you have to be thinking about being an actor on stage and not the gymnastics that go on behind the camera.
You have brought a little over 4-minute video of you doing this. Would you like to introduce this before we show it?
Well, this is a performance that was done on a television show called Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women. And Ricky Jay produced or wrote a book called Learned Pigs and Fireproof Women, which was about obscure variety novelties from the 1800s to the early 1900s. And he asked me if I would be on the show, and so I did. And if you'd like to run it, we can.
Yes, we'll
talk
run it
about
now.
It's 5 characters from Charles Dickens' Oliver Twist. The characters are Monks, Nancy, Fagin, Bill Sykes, and the Artful Dodger. And the scene takes place in an old attic room in the slums of London. And it's the lead-in where Nancy gives a sleeping drug to Bill Sikes in order that she may slip out undetected and inform to Mr. Barlow where young Oliver is being held captive. Fagin discovers the treachery, tells Bill Sikes, who in a rage murders Nancy, and that's the melodrama.
So we'll now show this video.
Michael is enacting the end of the story. With Oliver away, Nancy has decided to inform on Fagin's gang, and the dangerous Bill Sikes is determined to strike back.
Hi there. Is there no one about? Fagin. Fagin? Curse the man. He'll have us all hanged.
Damnation. It's Nancy. She mustn't find me here. I must hide.
Sleeping sound, I've not been missed. But he'll waken soon. I'll better have the place ready. Damnation. The bottle, it's empty. And you'll want some when he wakes. I think I better slip out and get some before he wakes. Who is it? Oh, hello, Fagin.
Bill?
Fagin, what a strange smell. Laudanum, a sleeping potion? What? It's Nancy. She's given Bill a sleeping potion. Wake up, Bill. I've something... Cautious, Fagin, caution. If I awaken him, he'll flare up like a tiger. I'll waken you.
You dearly love a joke, don't you? I'll waken you with the sound of this here falling crowbar.
Remember, the only person you're seeing is Michael. Nothing is speeded up, and there is no camera trickery.
Curse it, what was that? What the devil's come over me? I could have swore I heard someone in there. Someone's in. And by God, I'll have him out.
Bill! Bill! Nancy's peached on us, Bill. She's informed on us all.
Fool! Fool! My God, you old fool! What did he say? Nancy tried to poison laudanum? Hell's fire. Nancy, what have you been up to? Why, she's gone. In form? Well, I'll find you, and I'll grind your brains to dust.
Something's gone wrong. He stood in the shadows. He rushed past with a terrible look in his eye. He said, "Am I working this night? I'm as good as dead. It's all horrible. It's all horrible."
Devil, inform on Bill Sikes? Well, stay where you are. I can manage. Stay where I tell you.
Majesty, open the door.
That was just unbelievable. I just don't think that's possible. But they indicate on it, there's no trickery. There is no. It's just fact. You do change that quickly, and you do come out in a different character.
Absolutely.
It's amazing talent, Janelle Burke.
Yeah.
Well, that's incredible, and it makes one almost speechless to think that you can do all of this in such a short period of time, and we see it, so we know that it's happened. Tell us, though, how many times would you do this kind of a performance in a span of time? Give us some idea.
Well, of course, when my dad was in vaudeville, he worked 6 days a week for 40 weeks, and then vaudeville later when it got up to 5 shows a day, toward the end of it, in the early 30s, everybody slowed down a little bit. I did a tour in Europe with it, but most of my success has been on television. I've done shows like the Hollywood Palace, the Milton Berle show. I did a demo of Quick Change on the Johnny Carson show. But it really is the magic community that has kept the performance side of this alive. I've been allowed to be associated with a lot of famous magicians. And Doug Heading had me on as an opening act for his tours in the late 70s, Harry Blackstone and Lance Burton. So fortunately for the magic community, they've been able to keep me going, and I'm about to celebrate 50 years of Quick Change this year with a performance that's going to be held at the Hollywood Magic Castle in the fall. So I've done it on and off for the last 50 years, but never as a career, because there just wasn't, vaudeville had gone by the wayside. It ran into television, and of course I was able to be involved with it in television.
It's a very strenuous thing physically, I would imagine.
Oh, very much so, very much so.
Tell us what kind of training you have to do to be in shape to do that.
A lot of running. Also a lot of vocal projection, because you have to be able to talk over the makeups. And it's just that intuitive situation between 2 assistants and yourself, where you think as one mind, and it's just split-second timing. Everything has to be just rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed, so you don't even think about it. If they have to think, now what's coming next, you know. My dad always had a member of his family. His brother worked with him and another gentleman for 35 years. I worked as an assistant. My brother worked as an assistant. And my brother and my sister worked as an assistant for me when I first started. So we've kept that training within the family. And then eventually my wife, Judy, who works here at North Idaho College, she has been one of my assistants.
Another really talented human being.
Oh, yes, that's a story in itself.
A costume designer. For our popcorn forum, we do a lot of Chautauqua performances against you. And without Judith, we couldn't do it. You can't do that without costumes, and so she's wonderful.
Costumes have an awful lot to do in Quick Changes. It's important that you have a variety of styles of costuming or characters. If they're all men of the same type of thing, it's just coats and there's no variety. So the reason for the melodrama and the Dickens is its period costuming, so it looks different each time a character comes out.
Reinhardt.
Give us a little bit of a glimpse of what your show is going to be like this fall at the Magic Theater. Is it going to be part of this?
It'll definitely be this, because my father performed it for 50 years, and then I started the very next year. I gave my first performance as a senior in high school. And then Ken Murray did a revival of Blackouts in 1958, which was the following year, and I went right into that show and had the excitement of being on the Ed Sullivan Show in the same year. So we will definitely do the Bill Sykes piece, and I'm also doing a performance for the Magic History Association, which is having a big convention, and I'll give a tribute to my dad, and also I'm not sure whether we're going to haul out the Western. We might do it just for the variety, because that's a lot of fun.
To pull that off, how many times will you practice? How long does it take to get back into form?
Well, at my age, it would probably take me 3 months, because I have to go through some rigorous physical training.
Wow.
And running is the first thing. Running, jogging, just to get your stamina up is important.
We don't have much time left on the program, but in talking with you the other day, getting ready for the program, I just had a delightful afternoon, and you had some interesting things to say about the Ed Sullivan Show. It was extremely popular, and he competed with another show at the same hour. But on that program, when you were on there, there was the guests were Edwin and Fabian, both, weren't they?
There was the new rock star Fabian was on the show, and by the way, the Ed Sullivan Show was the most disorganized show for a live television show of its stature. Mr. Sullivan didn't even show up for the dress rehearsal. He had it piped into his hotel suite, and then he would go through the notes and come back and change the position of acts so that everybody backstage that had rehearsed and set up things in a certain order, all of a sudden it would all get switched around. So as a result of it, my time was at the very end of the show, and the show had been running longer than it was scheduled to do, and I think I ended up doing like 3 minutes on it. My father was furious.
Yes, it was. I remember watching that program. It was very, very popular. But yeah, and he didn't do much introduction, just very brief. And there you're on and off.
Just very brief, and here he is, or there they are. And he had a tendency. A very good friend of ours, Tessie O'Shea, who was a big British music all-star singer, came on the show and get huge applause at the end of your act, and then go off stage. The audience applause would die when Ed Sullivan came off.
On that point, I have to bring the program to a conclusion. The good news is that our wonderful guest will be back. We're going to have something else next week, and he'll be back in 2 weeks, and I hope you'll join us then. Until then, please have a good week. I am Tony Stewart.
Recorded on the campus of North Idaho College, Public Forum is the longest-running in-house college production on PBS. Each episode is pre-recorded live and is an educational outreach from North Idaho College. Please join us at this same time next week for another edition of Public Forum on this public television station.